Today we're doing an interview with poet Coralie Reed, and her latest work is the fashion shows. And we have her here at Sedgwick Studios of Artists International, and we're going to be talking about it. Coralie, the name Coralie itself is unusual. Where does it come from?
Well, actually, it's a family name, and it's a variation of my grandmother's name, and I'm very proud to have it.
Yeah, it's
very proud.
It's good, and the one thing I will say that we're our brothers and sisters, but that really had no bearing on the project. The point is your stuff is just great. Okay, tell us about yourself, your story, kind of on an executive summary level, so the audience can kind of get to know a little bit about who this person is.
Okay, sure. Well, I've written poetry ever since I was small. But when I got older, I decided to be practical, and so I went to journalism school.
Mm-hmm. You went to University of Iowa and then to KU down in Kansas.
Exactly, yeah. University of Kansas. And then once I graduated, I fell into television. I mean, I literally had no aspirations to be in television. And I started to work for this television consulting firm. It's a very large television consulting firm.
Renowned.
Yes.
Big agency.
Very renowned. Yes. Where I learned so much, and the work was fascinating, absolutely fascinating. But after a couple of years there,
and a lot of it, you were critiquing at first.
Yes, we were. We were critiquing newscasts, promotions, anchors,
that's an interesting thing, and I think, like we've talked about, that
it is. It was fascinating. It was a great experience to have.
And sometimes can end up on a little negative.
Well, that was what I felt like I needed, or I wanted to be on the side of TV in the creation aspect, as opposed to the critiquing aspect.
Because then you moved into production and producing.
Then I moved to a television station where I became a producer.
Yeah.
And I produced promotion, and was very happy there for many years. That was a very good outlet for me. Until the stress of TV. TV's very deadline oriented. The stress absolutely pushed all the writing and poetry out of me. And then when that happened, I felt like I needed to pursue writing full time.
Yeah.
So I went and I received an MFA, went and got an MFA in creative writing, and then I've just never looked back.
Right, and you're a worker.
I am a worker.
When I go into your office, it is like, and perfectionist, and maybe that's just a kind of a family quality, but just really striving. I mean, it's just meticulous attention to detail.
I try. I really try.
Yeah.
To keep the quality high. Yeah, I really work at it.
And then the fashion shows. I mean, it is so self-evident that this is coming from someone that put tremendous intention into this. Of course, the fashion shows itself, it caught my attention, and I always have to be quite pragmatic in whatever artistic investments we're going to be making, as an organization and all that. But I remember I looked at the initial cover and just thought, this is hot. And though, sometimes I have some detest of the celebrity culture and all that. On the other hand, this was just so. This is something that the Marc Jacobs of the world and people like that I think would really love to read, because it's just so there and captures so many of the emotional aspects that are in the fashion industry. I mean, let's talk about that.
Well, I hope that they receive the book well, because I tried to capture the essence of what is happening in fashion and what fashion is all about. It's not an anti-fashion book, and it's not a pro-fashion book. I feel like it's a book that explores the conflict that women have within themselves when faced with fashion and beauty issues in the culture.
Yeah. I mean, just like that's what we were recording, and the engineers and I were working through the materials. Just like we talk about runway crashes.
Yes, exactly. Which all those things spawned from, my own personal obsession with fashion and just watching so much fashion on TV, like Fashion File, and now you can watch runway shows on the internet, and just reading and.
Who are your influences?
Are you talking about poetic influences?
Yeah, let's go there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I've had many influences, but I'd have to say the most defining and primary influence has been Jory Graham, the poet Jory Graham. And I found her book, The End of Beauty, years ago. And when I picked up that book, I was like, I finally found a female poet whose voice I relate to. Because it wasn't a needy voice, it wasn't a depressed voice, it was just a strong female voice, and the poems were amazing, just amazing. Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about your creative process. I think that's an interesting question that most artists should pose to them. I'm always interested in that anyway. Let's talk about it.
My creative process is that I write many projects simultaneously.
Just like when we're doing a film, we're doing an A roll, B roll, and C roll.
Exactly,
okay.
Exactly. So I can write 50 to 100 poems at once, plus multiple book projects at once. And I can't explain it. A lot of people have questioned it. They don't understand it. But that's just the way I work, and it works for me, and I just go with it.
I mean, I'll just, my commentary on that is that, I find that the artist or scientist or whatever you're working at, if you follow the muse and if the energy is flowing and the idea, because ideas are so fragile, and if you don't get them, they're lost. And so, exactly. And even though it may appear to be kind of a form of ADD, you've got multiple things going on, but they all are worthy of pursuit, and they have to be captured. And
exactly. You have to seize the moment.
Yes.
And I look at poems, for me, they're like puzzles, and I wait for each piece to come to me.
Oh.
And, some days, it may take me only one day to finish a poem. It may take me 3 years to finish a poem. It just depends on the project and how the pieces come to me. But I never force it. I do wait for the pieces to fit.
And I love it. Like the titles of the poems, 31 fashion shows, 28 fashion shows, 25 fashion shows.
Yes.
I mean, there's definitely a theme there. Let's talk about that convention.
Well, the genesis, it happened, the genesis of the project was that I was trying to deal with the death of my mother, and I was just trying to heal myself from all the grief. I just felt like I was going to be swallowed in grief if I didn't do something. Mm-hmm. And all the books I was working on at the time were depressing. And that was not helping the situation. And so one day I just said, you know what, I'm just going to write something fun, something that makes me laugh, because I just need to laugh. I just need to have some fun. And so I sat down and just wrote a poem for myself.
And it does make you laugh.
I hope so.
Now the thing about it is, and you're in the Red Room recording, which is our primary voiceover and vocal room, and I'm sitting with the engineers, and there's these huge words, and of course, whatever, and it's like, well, you know what that is? No. Of course, so I'm not saying you have to have an IQ of 170 to interpret it, but the feel is so great and everything. I mean, let's just talk about that and your use of words.
Well, I feel like the use of serious words gives a little bit more gravity to the subject of fashion, because I think people think it's a lightweight subject, and it isn't. But having said that, I think that since the poems are collage poems, they're meant to be fun. So you don't need to understand any any words or even go, what does this poem mean? You're just supposed to enjoy the experience.
Just hearing some of these words is like, wow, that's cool to listen to. And, if it advances the human species or the human acumen as far as where we think, hey, go for it. It's just like when you listen to someone in a foreign language and go, oh, the Japanese people, they speak kind of like this.
Yeah, exactly. Well, fashion has an intelligence all its own too, and people don't give it credit. But it also doesn't help when people say things like, that's so gorge. I mean, that just sort of makes it seem like this flighty, stupid endeavor. Right. It's not.
No, it's not. No, the whole fashion thing is, as we have talked about before, the nature of essence and our clothes as being outer layers of who we are, and sometimes we're even judged on some level as human beings. Because of these perceptions and outer layers.
Exactly.
And it, of course, can extend very much beyond clothing. I mean, our family names or our sex or our titles that put us in these constraints or boxes,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I relate. Let's talk about the business models. I mean, that's probably a touchy subject, but let's just talk about it a little bit, because I know in the MBI and AI world, or the Artists International worlds, of course, we've always challenged different business models and healthcare and health science and just the way it's been done. And when we're working with the artists, we always try to find very fair compensation approaches, because so many have been ripped off and what have you. But let's talk about really the business models in poetry. Would you like to elaborate there?
Sure. Well, I think that the business models in poetry, they depend so much on funding their nonprofits, so they're not really thinking about a business model.
Well, I mean, which is okay. It should be authentic.
I think that they're thinking about the pure art of it and just trying to get it out the best way they can and hope that they have funding. But I just feel like there's more of a market for poetry out there if we can just tap into it.
If it can be more accessible, how it's put out there.
Exactly.
And it's not, I think, where the idea where only poets read poetry, I think it can be much more, we should make it much more accessible. Because I surely know that when I even think of something like the end of The Nights in White Satin, and they have the poem at the end, that when I hear that, it does something to me. Exactly. And I thought, well, geez, why can't that kind of thing be a little more commonplace? Mm-hmm. It's definitely something we're experimenting with.
Exactly. I think that there is an audience for poetry.
Yes.
That you just need to really tap into what the culture needs to hear or wants to hear, kind of the zeitgeist, and that people will respond. People will come. I
mean, if it touches fundamental the human element of the human condition.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely.
Exactly.
Do you have any last words for aspiring poets or people in general?
Well, my advice to aspiring poets would be to try to make your art undeniable. And what I mean by that is you're eventually probably going to send it out to editors of literary journals and try to elevate. I would try to strive to elevate your art, your writing, your poetry to a level where it's really hard for those editors to deny you. Really hard. This is not to say that you're not going to get rejections, because you will. You're going to, no matter who you are,
life is
you're
full
going to
of
get
obstacles.
tons of rejections. Yes. But make it as hard. Make your art as good, as excellent as possible, and make it hard for them. And a lot of times, if you write a great poem and they've never heard of you, you might get a note. That means you made an impression, and to just keep at it, because you will succeed. So just strive to make your work different, to make it stand out, I would say. Yeah. Not for the sake of standing out, but just for your own, just pushing yourself.
Exactly, because the art ultimately has to come from good art comes from an authentic place.
Exactly.
Yeah. And we should be writing for ourselves, rather than trying to please the critics, trying to please whoever.
Right.
And that's real.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Coralie, again, I want to thank you. It's been great having you here at Sedgwick NAI to do these recordings, and it's going to be a marvelous production as it's released. And again, we're talking about the fashion shows, and both in book form as well as in auditory form. So it's something that can be downloaded from iTunes and what have you. So, Coralie, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.